Welcome to this explainer. It's almost hard to wrap your head around, but just 4 decades ago, China's economy was a tiny fraction of what it is today. We're talking widespread agricultural poverty for millions of people. Cut to today, it's literally the manufacturing engine of the globe and a total technological superpower. So we're going to dive right in and detail the specific mechanisms that drove what is, honestly, the fastest and most massive economic expansion in human history.
Here is a quick roadmap of how we'll break this down. First, we'll look at China before the reforms. Second, the massive 1978 economic turning point. Third, their shift into becoming the world's factory. Fourth, the huge investments in infrastructure and education. Fifth, the technology revolution. And finally, we'll wrap up with future challenges and global impact.
All right, part one, China before the reforms. Let's picture the 1970s for a second. The reality on the ground was a heavily rural, intensely agricultural society. Most people lived in villages with super limited access to technology, factories, or even basic infrastructure. They were lagging way behind powerhouses like the US and Japan. Contrast that with today's reality, a highly connected, heavily industrialized global superpower with a world-class high-speed rail network. It's a night and day difference that very few people saw coming.
Moving on to part two, the 1978 economic turning point.
So, all through the 1970s, the government kept a really tight, centralized grip on every single aspect of the economy. But in 1978, that was a massive strategic pivot. They rolled out some major economic reforms, and by the time the 1980s hit, they essentially flipped the script. They opened their doors, actively inviting global business and foreign investment right in. The real game changer here was the creation of what they called special economic zones. Think of these as designated hotspots with really favorable rules that allowed international companies to easily build factories and invest. For foreign businesses, this was an absolute goldmine. They suddenly had access to a massive workforce, way lower production costs, and a domestic market that was just waiting to explode.
Which leads us to part three, becoming the world's factory.
With all that global investment pouring in, China rapidly took on a brand new role. We've all seen the phrase made in China on practically everything, right? Well, this is where that industrial production just absolutely exploded. Factories popped up everywhere, churning out electronics, clothing, toys, complex machinery, you name it. Millions of jobs were created, and China locked in its position as the undisputed center of the global supply chain. And here's the kicker. This all happened over just 40 years. 40 years! In the grand scheme of history, that is literally the blink of an eye. This relentless industrial boom transformed entire city skylines from the ground up and lifted millions of people out of poverty, generating wealth at a scale we've rarely ever seen. Let's look at part four, infrastructure and educational investments. Because honestly, just being a manufacturing hub wasn't the end goal. They strategically poured that massive new wealth right back into the country using a synchronized two-pronged approach. On one side, you had this incredible infrastructure boom. New highways, massive airports, expanded global ports, and of course, one of the world's largest high-speed rail networks to move things instantly. On the flip side, educational expansion. They heavily funded universities and research labs, cranking out millions of STEM students to build a seriously skilled workforce for the future. And that sets up part five perfectly, the technology revolution. With that highly skilled workforce ready to go, China wasn't satisfied just building other people's products anymore. They wanted to innovate. So, national priorities shifted sharply. They funneled immense resources directly into fields like artificial intelligence, robotics, renewable energy, and telecommunications. Practically overnight, they evolved from a manufacturing giant into a legitimate cutting-edge technology powerhouse. So, stepping back for a second, a question that always comes up when you look at this trajectory is, why did China manage to grow so much faster than other developing nations? Well, the truth is, there wasn't just one magic bullet. It was kind of a perfect storm. It was this powerful compounding effect of having a massive available workforce, combined with unwavering long-term economic planning. Throw in that relentless infrastructure investment, highly specialized education, and a total opening up to global trade, and you get a formula that just compounded decade after decade. Which brings us to our final section, future challenges and global impact. Despite this completely monumental success story, the road ahead isn't exactly a flawless victory lap.
Today, China is facing some really intense headwinds. Domestically, they have to navigate a rapidly aging population that's definitely going to strain their workforce. Plus, they have to clean up the critical environmental fallout from all that hyper-rapid industrialization. And internationally, they're constantly managing fierce global competition and ongoing trade disputes that could seriously throttle their economic growth. But look, whether China continues this meteoric rise or stumbles against those new hurdles, one thing is absolutely for sure. Their transformation from widespread poverty to a global economic superpower has fundamentally rewired the world. It is a stunning proof of concept for how focused infrastructure, education, tech, and long-term planning can entirely rewrite a nation's destiny. So I'm going to leave you with this stitch you on. As China stares down these massive new pressures, both at home and abroad, how are their responses going to shape the future of our world? Because whatever they do next, it's going to ripple through the entire global economy. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep analyzing, keep learning, and I'll catch you next time.